Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. Week 11 lived up to the hype on our CBS NFL slate. We saw the Chiefs go down. We saw the Steelers make a stand in the North, a game that our Charles Davis had a front row seat to. And now as we turn our attention to Week 12, we also have our eyes once again on the Kansas City Chiefs as they look to bounce back. They're facing a Panthers team that's won back-to-back games for the first time since weeks 1 through 3 back in 21. Our crew of Ian Eagle, Charles Davis, and Evan Washburn will be there to bring us all the action as it comes. And we are lucky enough to have our Charles Davis with us here on Spotlight. Charles, thanks so much for taking the time. I want to start out by talking about Kansas City because it just felt like they were playing with fire over the last couple of weeks, even going back to the first week of the season. Almost feels like that loss maybe a breath of fresh air for them as they go into this game against the Panthers. How do you think that the Kansas City Chiefs are approaching it?
I like what you're suggesting because I think that's how they have to approach it. And my guess is that's how Andy Reid and the rest of the coaching staff and the leadership of this team, the top veteran guys, have approached it as well. They were getting away with things, right? When you have 7 comebacks in your first 9 games, you start to think you're invincible. When you block a field goal when you're not supposed to, right? When a toenail comes down out of bounds and you win, okay, we can get away with some of the things not being quite right. I think this allowed the coaching staff and the players to say, hold on a second. We have to lock in and get on our details and make sure we're ready to go because it's not going to just happen. And by the way, everyone's going to come for us now. And our margin for error for home field advantage really got sliced because they lost to the worst possible team. They lost to Buffalo. Buffalo now owns the head-to-head if there's a tie at the end of the year.
That's a great point, Charles. And we know if there's anything that history has told us, that those two teams are always on a fast track to meet each other in the postseason. So a great note there. I feel like as well, one of the reasons why they keep getting stuck in these close games is because the offense to start the game, Charles, has been so slow. I mean, we know what Patrick Mahomes can do with the ball in his hands, but what's the key to getting him and the rest of the offense to get out to a hot start early?
Being clean. Right? Being clean. How many times have we heard the expression, slow is smooth and smooth is fast? You hear it out of the military all the time, right? Don't be herky-jerky in your operation. Don't go so fast that you can't control what you're doing. Make sure you are in balance, in rhythm. And if you're smooth, everything will accelerate. Well, with Kansas City, they have not been smooth. They ran one of those little razzle-dazzle plays to open up against Buffalo. 2 plays later, Patrick Mahomes gets tagged on his ankle, off balance, throws one about 8 feet over the head of the receiver, turns into an interception, first series of the game. Those are the things they have to avoid to get themselves going because they are not the explosive Chiefs that we got used to seeing through the early years of Patrick Mahomes. They're going to be more methodical in what they do. They can't afford to waste possessions.
The good thing when it comes to Patrick Mahomes is that in the one time he has faced Carolina, he threw for 372 yards and 4 touchdowns. So history, again, they're on his side. But to your point, you can't have those mistakes early in the game like you just described. On the other side of this matchup, Charles, the Panthers are exactly who we thought they would be. They're 3-7. They do get Bryce Young back behind center, which we'll get to in a minute. But I want to target the run game here. Shout out to Chuba Hubbard, who has been my guy on fantasy this year. He has saved me. But now they get the bonus of having rookie Jonathan Brooks back in the mix. He is expected to play on Sunday. Charles, how would you evaluate the run game this season in Carolina under first-year head coach Dave Canales?
It's actually been excellent for them, and it's been the lifesaver for their offense, and it's been what they lean on. And it goes back to Dave Canales' roots in coaching because who was he really raised under? One Pete Carroll in Seattle. Run the football almost at all costs. Be a run-first team. Establish yourselves at the line of scrimmage and be physical, and have that have you impose your will on teams as the game went on. Have that back that can do it. Chuba Hubbard's been doing that all year long. 153 yards in Munich. All right, in the last ball game against the Giants, against Dexter Lawrence and that really good defensive front of the Giants. So that's what they have to do. And now you get Jonathan Brooks because remember, Miles Sanders got hurt in the game in Munich. He's probably out for this game, but you get Jonathan Brooks back at the right time, and they drafted him to ultimately be their starting running back, although he'll have a hard time prying that from Chuba Hubbard right now. But 2 should be better than 1 against Kansas City, who, by the way, is giving up the least amount of yards per carry from running backs during the season, 3.1 yards per carry. So it's going to be a force of offensive line, running backs, against a defensive front in Kansas City that's been awfully good.
Yeah, I'm apologizing to Chuba Hubbard because my fantasy team actually just got eliminated from the playoffs, so I'm sorry for wasting his time this season. I know, it's Brandon Baylor's fault. We don't have time to get into it. I'm told we're tight on time, but nonetheless, he's been fantastic. Chuba Hubbard closing in on 1,000 rushing yards. He'd be the first one since Christian McCaffrey back in 2019, so that's something to keep in mind. Charles, we mentioned it earlier, Bryce Young back behind center, and while we have expected the Panthers to be who they are this year, we maybe didn't expect it to be in this way when it comes to Bryce Young. What do you think the approach should be for the rest of this season, especially when you think about this is a franchise that's going to have to make a decision for the future when the season is done?
Yeah, I'm the outsider. So, for me, this is very simple. I can't wait to get to Carolina and ask them again what the philosophy is going to be about him, because every week we hear you're competing for the starting job. We're not sure if it's going to be him or Andy Dalton when Andy Dalton's hand is totally healed, which I believe it is now. To me, he has the ball the rest of the year, because you have to evaluate whether the guy that you spent all that draft capital on and made the #1 overall pick on last season is going to be your future quarterback or not. And you don't get that if Andy Dalton's playing quarterback, not on a 3-17. Okay, so he has to have the ball in every single situation, up, down, even, playing well, playing poorly. You've got to see him in everything so that you can make the right evaluation and go from there. Dan Morgan, general manager, David Tepper, owner of the team, the rest of the organization, Dave Canales and coaching staff. To me, it shouldn't even be a question every week about who's starting the game. It's Bryce Young. Find out what's going on. I know what Dave Canales is doing for his team, but for the organization, you have to know whether number 9 is going to be #1 for you in 2025.
Sometimes you got to think about that big picture as opposed to just what's going on right now. By the way, Patrick Mahomes has the best record by any quarterback in the last 20 years. Bryce Young has the worst, -20 starts. So this should be a good one is the point I'm trying to make. Charles, we're excited for you to be on the call. We look forward to checking in with you as the weekend goes on. That game gets our Sunday started. Panthers, Chiefs kicking off at 1 o'clock Eastern alongside a really interesting 1 o'clock slate as well. You got the Titans and the Texans, the Patriots and the Dolphins right down the road from our studio here in South Florida. Then at 4:05, the Broncos have been surging. Can they keep it going against the Raiders? Sunday on CBS.